When it comes to your finances, go for the credit card that's always there for you. With 24/7 US-based live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We're talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Hey there, What Next listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later. It's from one of our partners, SAP. AI comes at you fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Whether you're looking to automate tasks or embed AI in your business processes, SAP can help. To learn more, head to sap.com/AI. And stick around for expert advice on how to embrace AI with confidence.
A quick heads up, we are talking about IUDs today, and that conversation includes describing the insertion process. Okay, here's the show. Mia Armstrong Lopez got her IUD as a sophomore in college. It was 2017, just after Donald Trump's election.
There was a very intense feeling of reproductive health and reproductive freedom being under attack. And at that point in time, I had been taking birth control pills for a number of years. I was never very good at taking them. I always forgot to bring them with me. And I was seeing and hearing a lot about IUDs. There was a sort of magnetism around IUDs. I remember on my college campus, I had a whole string of friends who were going into the student clinic to get one inserted. And it just sort of felt like the undisputable best option.
Mia is now a journalist who covers health and justice, and she recently wrote about IUDs, intrauterine devices, for Slate. I asked Mia to describe her insertion appointment. She remembered dreading it. Some of her friends had told her horror stories about the pain of having the device pushed up into their uterus.
I remember walking into the room. I remember it being a lot of metal involved, a lot of stainless steel. I remember sort of lying down for the insertion. I remember the nurse saying something like, "You'll feel a pinch, you'll feel some pressure, it'll be over quickly." And honestly, I don't remember much more from that process.
I gotta say, Mia is lucky here. I was in so much pain when I got my IUD that I told the nurse that I would rather go through labor again. But it doesn't have to be that way.
There are a lot of really effective tools that doctors and healthcare providers can use to make the procedure less painful for folks who want to get an IUD. But the problem is that a lot of women are still not being offered those options. And so I think that's one of the challenges is as the science on the IUD progresses, we're seeing better ways to make it a better experience for women. But the time that it takes for that to trickle down to exam rooms and the folks who are actually providing healthcare, it can be a long time. And I think that's why a lot of folks associate, really negative experiences and this dismissal of pain.
Mia's IUD is a Mirena, which secretes hormones into her body. It's the #1 prescribed IUD in the US. At first, Mia was told it would last for 5 years. Then that was changed to 7 years, then 8.
I had this kind of simple question about my IUD, which was, how long can I be confident that it lasts? Because it's really important for me to be super confident that it is still doing its job in there. It was kind of hard to get that question answered. And as I started talking to other women about their IUDs, I found that they had lots of other questions.
Like, why didn't I get pain relief? Why am I getting acne? Why do I keep getting infections? Why is such a widespread device still such a mystery? So Mia set out to answer their questions. Today on the show, the complicated story of technological progress, bodily autonomy, and politics. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around. When it comes to your finances, go for the credit card that's always there for you. With 24/7 US-based live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We're talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. AI is moving so fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Welcome to Dear Artie, an advice column from SAP, where we tackle the tricky questions at the intersection of AI and business. Let's meet our expert.
Hi, I'm Ian Khan. I'm a technology futurist, speaker, and author, and I love to help organizations measure their current state of readiness for an AI-driven world. I'm excited to dive into today's question.
Dear Artie, our finance team is top-notch, but small. How can AI support them? Signed, Financially Drained.
Well, financially drained, a lot is happening in finance and AI, and the possibilities are endless. First of all, AI can help your finance team analyze massive amounts of financial data faster than any human or a team of people could do. Second, it can help perform functions on data through algorithms. This can connect different systems together and really simplify decision-making for your finance team. And last but not least, AI can help reduce the time needed for data to provide insights so that your leaders can make faster decisions.
Embrace AI with confidence. Head to sap.com/AI to learn more.
I want to do some basics here for people who've never had an IUD or don't really understand them. How does an IUD work?
So we know that the primary way that IUDs work is by preventing fertilization. So it's going to depend on whether you have a hormonal or a copper IUD. The hormonal IUDs are going to slowly release a small amount of hormones progressively over time. And those hormones, their primary effect is going to be thickening the cervical mucus. So one of the researchers that I talked to described this as like putting a wall up in front of the sperm, right? Or putting the egg behind a bank vault. If the sperm can't get to the egg, there can't be fertilization, there can't be a pregnancy. Similarly, if you have a copper IUD, it's going to release copper ions over time, which have a spermicidal effect and are, again, going to prevent the sperm from being able to successfully fertilize the egg.
When did IUDs begin to become popular in the United States? Because they have a pretty fascinating history.
They do have a fascinating history. In many ways, it's a dark history. In the first half of the 1900s, we started to see doctors and women kind of experimenting with intrauterine contraception, but this was kind of happening behind closed doors, right? There wasn't any sort of systematic use of IUDs. I think the earliest model that is recorded is something that had to do with the silkworm gut, right? Putting it up there and seeing what it would do for contraception.
Ugh.
But then in the 1950s, we started to see a larger push toward contraceptive methods. So this is when we also get a lot of development of the birth control pill. And the reason for this is because at the time, there was a lot of panic over a so-called population bomb.
That was the idea, put forth by politicians and thinkers in industrialized countries, that women, especially those in the global South, were having too many children. They worried that population growth could cause famine, environmental destruction, maybe even nuclear war.
As a result of those fears, what we see is funders begin to fund the development of new models of IUDs. We also see them organizing conferences. This is mostly happening in the 50s. To bring together the doctors who had sort of been experimenting with IUDs behind closed doors and those who were interested in using them on their patients. And what they're doing is they're brainstorming new models and they're sort of trying to establish the IUD as an effective contraceptive. They run some trials to this extent. And that brings us to the 60s. And in the 60s, we have a number of different IUD models. At this point, they're just plastic, and they are kind of coming into play across the US, being inserted at Planned Parenthood clinics, which were fairly new at the time. And they're also being exported to other countries as part of these international aid and development efforts.
I want you to describe what these early IUDs even looked like, because an IUD now is almost like a little, I don't know, wishbone almost of plastic with a string attached. What did they look like then?
Yes. So the variation was quite wide. Probably one of the most famous early IUDs is named the Lips Loop. And here you should imagine just sort of like a swirl, right? It's like a straight piece of plastic that curls up and swirls around, also has some strings attached. We have others that look more like rings. We have some really terrifying models that are like two pieces of plastic crossed in an X. So there's a lot of variation here. But I think it all leads up to what I would say is the most infamous IUD model, and also the most terrifyingly shaped IUD model, which is the Dalkon Shield. And this one looks like a cross between a beetle and a crab. It's sort of an oval that has these legs sticking out. If you have a uterus and you look up a picture of the Dalkon Shield, you will feel horrified. And this sort of came on the market in the US in 1971.
The Dalkon Shield was infamous. Tell me why.
There's a couple of factors that come into play here. One of the things that happens is the Dalkon Shield is one of the first IUDs to be marketed to women without children, women who hadn't had a previous pregnancy.
Because that was always the messaging. Like, you can only get an IUD if you have already had children.
Right, exactly. So this is sort of a sea change in the way that IUDs are being marketed and prescribed to women. And the Dalkon Shield is also sort of marketed as the superior intrauterine device, right? They say, because of the surface area and the amount of plastic that is touching the uterus and also these legs that prevent expulsion, this is like the best model on the market. As a result, the device becomes very popular very quickly, but it also very quickly has a lot of problems. Some reports said it required 10 times more force compared to other IUDs to be able to insert this device, which is really horrific. There was a Washington Post report where a doctor said he found it was the most traumatic manipulation ever perpetrated on womanhood. So because of this, there are problems with perforations of the uterine wall, and there also may be problems with non-sterile insertion processes. Another significant flaw with the Dalkon Shield, and this is sort of the most famous flaw, is that IUDs have strings to pull them out, right? The string used in the Dalkon Shield was a multi-filament string. And so the effect of this is that there's a lot of surface area for bacteria to sort of, one researcher put it to me like the itsy bitsy spider, like climb up the water spout, right? Climb up, in this case, the multi-filament strings, and kind of get into a woman's body and be able to cause infections. The estimates are about 18 women died, and it caused hundreds of thousands of infections, in many cases infertility, septic abortions, miscarriages, just like a whole train of tragedy. There was also a number of lawsuits, understandably, against the device. Eventually, the company that manufactured it set up a trust fund that paid some $3 billion as a result of these class action lawsuits. And so the effect of this, obviously the most tragic effect is the effect on women's lives, but there's also a significant effect on the IUD market in the US, which is after the Dalkon Shield tragedy, IUD use in the US plummets. Almost all of the manufacturers of IUDs actually end up pulling their devices off the market just because women are understandably now reticent to insert any IUD, even beyond the Dalkon Shield.
When we come back, how the IUD went from horror story to symbol of reproductive freedom. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great tax rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
The Dalkin Shield tragedy made IUDs seem terrifying, but it also did something else. It created the impetus for the government to act.
Congress establishes 3 different classes of medical devices that, depending on the risk that they pose to patients, require different levels of pre-market review before they can be inserted, right, or be marketed. This is really important because the reason that the Dalkin Shield had so many problems is because it was not tested in any sort of systematic way before it was being inserted into women's bodies, right? It was being tested like live on women as it was getting inserted. There was some sort of pre-market test of 600 women that was run by the device's inventor before it was kind of brought to market. But again, that raises a number of red flags. So as a result, the Congress gives the FDA much more power to regulate medical devices. Today, IUDs are actually regulated not just as devices, but as drugs because of their hormones and copper, which means that they have to go through even more testing and review before they're put onto the market. So that's really good. It's really important. It means that the IUDs that we have today, we can trust. We do know that they're safe.
I feel like suddenly in the early 2000s, 2010s, IUDs really took off in popularity. What drove that?
There are a couple of factors here. One is that it is a scientifically very good device, and we now knew that, right? These new devices that were on the market had track records in Europe and other places. They had the regulatory track records. We knew that they were safe. There was also a moment that was politically really scary, right? We start to see this conversation about limiting reproductive rights and freedoms. And so for a lot of women, this idea of a device that you can insert that is low maintenance and that protects you for several years becomes really appealing. We also have the Affordable Care Act, which expands coverage of contraceptives under insurance. This makes devices much more accessible for women because sort of the sticker price of a lot of these devices is like $1,000. So it's really hard for folks who don't have that covered by insurance to be able to afford an IUD. And then we also just sort of see this culmination of media attention and public health attention, marking the IUD now as like the best contraceptive, right? This new age of like the IUD as the best birth control. So if you, like me, are a college student who's Googling like, what birth control should I insert? Like you're going to be served with a list of 10 articles about this is the best birth control. And so we start to see very quickly a lot of momentum kind of pick up behind the device.
Women started talking to their doctors and each other about whether getting an IUD was the best option. But like so many aspects of reproductive health care, it can feel hard to get comprehensive answers.
I think IUD users and women who choose to insert these devices are really craving like a sort of nuanced conversation about the IUD. I think because of the momentum and the energy that we saw, like, this is the best IUD, right? This is the best contraceptive. This is what you have to choose. A lot of women like me sort of went in for 15-minute conversations with a nurse practitioner when it was inserted, when we didn't really even have any questions that we could think to ask because we had been told this is the best device.
This is what you do.
This is what you do. And so we didn't have the conversations that we need to have about how the device works, about what its potential side effects could be. And so then when we experience a side effect, because it is an intervention in your body, lots of folks do experience side effects, as with any medicine. Like, it can almost feel like a sort of betrayal or a gaslighting. Like this, I've heard some women describe it like this. And this is, if you go on Reddit, if you go on TikTok and you follow the conversations that folks have about the IUD, there is a real sense of like, no one told me it would do this to my body. Why didn't they tell me that? And when I go and I talk to my doctors, they say, oh no, your IUD probably isn't causing that. And so there's a sort of sense of disbelief of women's expertise of their own bodies. And I think that that's a real problem in the way that we have kind of dealt with IUDs up to now.
At the same time that conversation is occurring, or those series of conversations, we are living in a time when reproductive rights have been significantly limited. Republicans are talking about targeting contraception. Senate Republicans just struck down a bill that would have protected access to birth control. And as you mentioned, we have seen IUDs really pick up in the wake of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. At this point, are IUDs a form of birth control? Are they an explicit political symbol? Why do you think they carry this kind of metaphorical weight?
I think they're both. I think they've become a political symbol. And I think sometimes there's a tendency to treat them as an uncomplicated symbol, right? I was thinking about this a lot, as a part of the Right to Contraception Act that you mentioned. There's this advocacy group called Americans for Contraception that is kind of launching this nationwide tour where they have this giant blow-up IUD. And it is a sort of symbol, a rallying cry of like, this is a device that is very important to many women, especially now in the context of abortion restrictions. And it is also a device that is under threat. So I sort of understand this as a political symbol. But I think we do have to acknowledge the sort of dark history that we mentioned of the device. And then I also think that we have to acknowledge that this is a medicine, right? It's a medical device. And so it is a tool for the woman who would like to choose it. And it should be a tool for the woman who would like to choose it to manage their fertility. But it's not going to be the best option for everyone. And it's not the way that we solve reproductive health. It's not the way that we solve access to reproductive health care. And so I think it can be sort of dangerous to take this medical device that can interact with people's bodies in complicated ways and to treat it as like, this needs to be a very clear rallying call or rallying cry to defend our rights, because I agree. I do want to defend access to the IUD. The IUD has made a very important impact in my own life. But I think we do sort of have to acknowledge that it can be dangerous to add so much political weight to medicine and to ask medicine to do so much.
It's a tough question because it's sort of like, does this politicization that is entirely understandable also take away some of the need that you have pointed out for a more nuanced conversation between someone who wants an IUD or is curious and their provider, someone who needs more than just lie down on the table and we're going to shove this thing in there? And so I kind of wonder how to navigate that very rocky pass.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky. A lot of the doctors and researchers and reproductive health advocates that I talk to are very concerned, for example, about contraceptive misinformation that is spreading about the IUDs. They see folks on TikTok say, oh, my IUD caused me a loss of libido or caused me all of these mood swings. And this is information that kind of exists without context, right? Those are things that have been documented with the device, but it happens in a very, very small amount of people. We don't know how to establish the direct link, et cetera. So a lot of them worry about these conversations and worry that folks having conversations about sort of the negative things that an IUD might do to their bodies is going to be weaponized by those who would wish to restrict access to IUDs, right? And this is something that we're seeing not just with IUDs, but with hormonal birth control more widely, right? This has been sort of a rallying cry for a lot of, even Elon Musk's is publishing about, hormonal birth control is making women crazy and fat. And these is obviously, that is misinformation. It's not true. It is damaging. But I think that the way that we sort of fight that is, again, by bringing women into the conversation and saying, this is how these devices are developed. This is how we study them. This is what we don't know. This is the research that's still ongoing. I think the way to sort of combat that misinformation is to have better conversations with people. And if indeed we do need to be kind of gearing up for a war against contraceptives, I think it's really important that women feel bought into the contraceptive that they choose to use and feel that it does serve them and maybe acknowledge its limitations. But again, feel like it is something that they have autonomy over, because ultimately when we have less information about the birth control that we choose to use, it limits our choices.
Mia Armstrong-Lopez, thank you so much for coming on and for talking with me about your reporting.
Thank you. I would talk with you about the IUD all day.
Mia Armstrong-Lopez is a journalist who covers health and justice. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell, Patrick Fort, and Shayna Roth. Our show is edited by Paige Osborne. Alicia Montgomery is vice president of audio for Slate, and TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And if you like what you listened to today, I have a request for you. Join Slate Plus. It's the single best way to support our work. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. All right, we'll be back next week with more episodes. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.
Five Below means hot stuff, cool prices. Get the trends in your feed for way less. Candy, beauty, tech, room decor, and more. Plus extreme value finds in our 5 Beyond shop. Yup, you could say we're kind of a big deal. Shop in stores and fivebelow.com.